If someone had told Sarah Mitchell a year ago that her husband, the man she had trusted with every corner of her heart, would one day slip something into her evening tea, she would have laughed it off as a cruel joke. But that night, as the amber liquid swirled inside her cup and her husband's eyes darted nervously toward her, Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Michael had always been charming, the kind of man who could make a room laugh with a single story. To their neighbors in Austin, Texas, they were the picture-perfect couple, the handsome husband, the intelligent wife, the home with the white fence, and a Labrador retriever named Max. But behind closed doors, cracks had begun to spread, arguments about money, about time, about Michael's increasingly late nights at work. It was during one of those late nights, when Sarah had been cleaning up the kitchen, that she first noticed the tiny vial in the trash. A small amber bottle, the label partially torn but still legible, Zolpidem. Sleeping pills. At first she brushed it off. Maybe Michael had trouble sleeping. But then she realized the prescription wasn't in his name. That night, when Michael handed her the cup of chamomile tea, she caught the faintest scent, something bitter beneath the sweetness of honey. He smiled too widely as he urged, "Drink up, babe. You've had a long day. This will help you rest," her instincts screamed. So instead of sipping it down, she raised the cup to her lips, let the warm liquid touch her tongue, and then pretended to swallow. Later, when Michael thought she was fast asleep, Sarah lay still, her breath slow and even, her mind racing. Through the narrow slit of her eyelids, she saw him move. He lingered by her side of the bed for a moment, watching her, as if making sure she was truly under. Then he turned, his movements swift, deliberate. He reached for her phone on the nightstand. Her pulse thundered in her ears, but she kept her body limp, fighting the urge to sit up and demand an explanation. He unlocked it, he knew her password, and scrolled through her messages. His jaw tightened. He opened her emails. Then, after a few tense minutes, he placed the phone back carefully, almost too carefully, like a man trying not to leave fingerprints. Sarah's skin crawled. What was he looking for? Evidence of something? Or was he hiding something of his own? But the night didn't end there. Michael went to his closet, pulled out a shoebox, and set it on the bed beside her. Sarah forced her breaths to remain steady, her heart hammering as he lifted the lid. Inside was a stack of cash, thousands of dollars, and beneath it, envelopes. She recognized one instantly, an insurance policy with her name bold across the top. Her stomach dropped. He leafed through the papers, checked his watch, then tucked everything back into the box and slid it under his side of the bed. Finally, he leaned over her, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "Good night, Sarah," he whispered, his voice soft, almost affectionate. But beneath it, she heard something else. Calculation. When the lights clicked off and his breathing eventually settled into sleep, Sarah lay awake in the dark, every nerve in her body on fire. This wasn't just about sleeping pills. This was about something bigger, something dangerous, and if Michael thought she was going to be his naive, trusting wife forever, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. The next morning, Sarah acted as if nothing had happened. She kissed Michael on the cheek, thanked him for making tea, and busied herself with packing his lunch before he left for work. But behind her smile, her mind was racing. Every detail of the night replayed in her head. The bitter taste of the tea, the shoebox under the bed, the insurance papers with her name on them. Once the front door closed and she heard his car pull away, Sarah exhaled a shaky breath. She didn't have much time before he might come back for something he forgot. Michael had grown unpredictable lately, his mood swinging from affectionate to irritable in seconds. She hurried upstairs, lifted the bedskirt, and dragged out the shoebox. Her hands trembled as she pulled back the lid. The stack of cash was neatly arranged in bands, far too much for Michael's modest accounting job to explain. Beneath it, documents lay in careful order. Her life insurance policy, their mortgage papers, a second insurance policy she didn't recognize. This one listing Michael as the sole beneficiary. Her throat tightened. He had taken out another policy without telling her. She quickly snapped photos with her phone, careful to return everything exactly as it was. She couldn't confront him yet, not without proof of what he was planning. The rest of the day passed in a blur. At work, Sarah could barely focus. She sat in her small cubicle at the marketing firm, typing half-heartedly, her mind replaying Michael's every glance, every suspicious late-night phone call. She remembered the way his eyes had darted toward her last night, almost as if he was waiting for her to stop breathing. By evening, she had a plan. She stopped by the pharmacy on her way home and bought a small testing kit for substances, something she remembered from a college friend studying forensic science. Back at home, she waited until Michael was in the shower, then slipped the kit into her bathroom drawer. That night, Michael brought her another cup of tea, sweetened with honey just the way she liked. She smiled, thanked him, and lifted the cup to her lips. This time, instead of pretending to drink, she discreetly tipped a little into a small vial she had hidden in her robe pocket. Later, when he thought she was asleep, she slipped into the bathroom and ran the test. Her stomach clenched as the strip turned positive for sedative substances. Not just chamomile. He was drugging her. Tears burned her eyes as she sat on the cold tile floor, clutching the vial. Why? What was he trying to do to her? The next morning, she didn't confront him. She played her part perfectly, sweet, tired, grateful for his care. Inside, though, Sarah was building walls of steel. Over the next week, she pretended to sip the tea every night, secretly discarding it into the sink or pouring it into a houseplant. And every night she stayed awake, feigning sleep while Michael rifled through her things. Sometimes it was her phone, other times her laptop. Once, she watched him carefully measure documents on the desk, as though making copies. One evening, Sarah decided to follow him. After dinner, Michael claimed he had to go back to the office to finish paperwork. She kissed him goodbye, waited 10 minutes, then grabbed her keys and tailed his car through the quiet Austin streets. He didn't drive to the office. Instead, he parked behind a dimly lit bar on the edge of town. Sarah pulled into a lot across the street and watched as he entered through a side door. 10 minutes later, through the cracked blinds of a second-floor window, she saw him sitting across from a woman she didn't recognize. Tall, dark hair, sharp features. They leaned close, whispering urgently. At one point, Michael slid an envelope across the table. The woman counted the cash inside, nodded, and handed him a small black folder. Sarah's blood went cold. She grabbed her phone, zooming in to capture photos. The quality wasn't perfect, but it was enough to show Michael wasn't where he said he was. Enough to show he was hiding something. When he returned home later that night, he smelled faintly of whiskey, his smile wide and practiced. "Long night," he said, kissing her forehead. "Sorry I'm late," Sarah forced a smile, swallowing her anger. "It's okay, honey. I'm just glad you're home safe." But inside, her rage simmered. Michael thought he was clever, thought she was weak. But Sarah wasn't going to wait around to become a victim. If he was planning something against her, she would be ready. And when the time came, she would make sure Michael paid for every single lie. Sarah had always believed that betrayal came in whispers, an unanswered text, a strange perfume lingering on a shirt, a late-night phone call that ended too quickly. But with Michael, betrayal was louder than thunder. It came in drugged tea, stacks of cash, and secret meetings with a woman Sarah didn't recognize. By now, the pieces were falling into place. The insurance policies, the sedatives, the late-night disappearances. Michael wasn't just drifting away from her. He was orchestrating something dangerous, something that could leave her lifeless in their perfect little house while he walked away with a fortune. But Sarah wasn't the same naive woman he thought she married. She was smarter, stronger, and she had one advantage he didn't know about. She was watching him just as closely as he was watching her. The morning after she followed him to the bar, Sarah slipped out of bed early, careful not to wake him. She dug through his suit jacket and found the black folder he had received from the woman. Inside were bank statements, offshore accounts, and a second phone bill for a number she didn't recognize. Her heart stopped when she saw the name listed on several transactions. Veronica Kane. Thousands of dollars sent under the guise of consulting fees. But judging by the late-night rendezvous, Sarah knew it wasn't consulting Michael was paying for. She copied everything with the small scanner she had hidden in her office drawer. Each beep of the machine made her heart pound, but she couldn't stop. Every document was another weapon, another piece of the arsenal she would use against him. That evening, Sarah played her role again. Loving wife, supportive partner. She cooked his favorite meal, laughed at his stories, and even kissed him goodnight. But as he drifted to sleep, Sarah sat in the glow of her phone, scrolling through Veronica's social media. Veronica Kane was a paralegal in a small law firm downtown. Newly divorced. Photos of expensive vacations, designer bags, nights out with friends. None of it matched her modest salary. Sarah didn't need to guess where the money was coming from. For the first time, Sarah allowed herself to feel the raw, searing anger that had been building in her chest. He wasn't just cheating. He was planning to erase her, cash in, and start a new life with Veronica. That night, Sarah made a decision. She wasn't going to the police yet, not without proof that would stick. And she wasn't going to confront Michael, not while he thought he still had the upper hand. No, Sarah was going to play his game. And she was going to win. Over the next week, she created her own little act. She drank his tea without protest, but always spat it into the sink when he wasn't looking. She let him rifle through her phone, but not before she planted misleading messages about her struggles at work or doctor appointments. She made sure to act sluggish in the mornings, convincing him the sedatives were working. Michael grew bolder, more confident. He started staying out later, sometimes not coming home until dawn. He stopped being careful about leaving receipts in his pockets. Fancy dinners, jewelry purchases, hotel stays. Sarah collected them all like puzzle pieces. Meanwhile, Sarah quietly reached out to Emily, her childhood best friend, who now worked as a private investigator. One afternoon, under the pretense of meeting for coffee, Sarah slid the folder of copied documents across the table. Emily's sharp eyes scanned the pages. "Sarah, this isn't just cheating. He's moving money offshore. And this new insurance policy? It's a setup. He's planning something bad." Sarah swallowed hard. "I know, that's why I need your help. I need everything. Bank records, phone logs, surveillance on him and Veronica. If he thinks he can take me down, I'll take him down first." Emily leaned back, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Girl, I've been waiting years for something this juicy. You're not just going to catch him, you're going to ruin him." For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt a flicker of power. Over the next month, Emily delivered everything. Photos of Michael and Veronica in hotel lobbies, records of wire transfers, evidence of meetings with shady consultants. Each report was another nail in the coffin Sarah was building for her husband. But revenge wasn't enough. Sarah wanted him to feel the same fear, the same helplessness, the same betrayal he had forced on her, so she began planting seeds. She forgot her phone unlocked on the counter, showing a text exchange with a mysterious number named Agent R. She made hushed phone calls in the other room, ending them abruptly whenever Michael walked in. She left a manila envelope on her desk labeled Evidence, knowing full well he would peek, and just like she expected, paranoia began to creep into Michael's face. His eyes darted more often, his temper shorter, his hands trembling when he thought she wasn't looking. One night he asked casually, "Hey babe, you've been on the phone a lot lately. Something going on?" Sarah smiled sweetly, sipping her water. "Oh, nothing important. Just tying up loose ends." Michael forced a chuckle, but Sarah could see the flicker of unease in his eyes. He didn't know it yet, but his carefully spun web was unraveling, and she was the one pulling the threads. What Sarah didn't know, however, was that Michael was growing desperate. And desperate men were dangerous, because while she was planning her revenge, Michael was planning his final move. Michael's confidence had returned like a bad habit. He thought the money transfers, the secret meetings, and the sleepless nights of planning had all been done with surgical precision. In his mind, everything had been calculated down to the hour. The sedative dosage in her tea, the staged accident that would trigger the insurance payout, the offshore accounts that would receive the funds. He had imagined standing at a beach somewhere weeks from now, Veronica by his side, watching the sun glint off a life built from deceit. What he hadn't counted on was how meticulous Sarah could be when driven by fear and fury. The week his plan was scheduled to unfold, Sarah's days were a blur of quiet actions that felt louder than any scream. She had Emily's PI reports stacked neatly on the kitchen counter, printouts labeled with timestamps, dates, GPS coordinates, and receipts. Her phone contained copies of the surveillance photos, and hidden in a safe in her closet was a flash drive with every document: bank statements, wire transfers, hotel receipts, even the language of the policy, where Michael had named himself beneficiary under suspicious circumstances. Michael moved through the house with the ease of a man who believed he controlled the map. He continued serving tea, continued slipping into the bedroom late, continued pretending. But Sarah had changed the rules of the game. Instead of staying helpless in the kitchen, she'd learned the art of looking innocent while orchestrating the perfect exposure. On the evening he chose, Michael did what he always did. He brewed her chamomile and honey, the ritual of caring he had weaponized. Sarah sat at the table, her hands wrapped around the warm mug, eyes soft. The Labrador Max slept at her feet, breathing steady. "Rough week?" Michael asked, trying to sound casual. He set the cup in front of her and watched for the micro-expression that told him she was under. "Yeah," Sarah answered, her voice a gentle ribbon. "But I'm okay. Thanks." He lingered a moment longer than necessary, staring at her as if he were making sure this time the plan would actually work. When he left the room, she waited until the house was quiet, then slipped into the bathroom and baited the trap she had been assembling for days. Sarah had not only been collecting hard evidence, she had been planting illusions. She left a small recording device in her robe pocket that she pretended to wear for comfort, but actually used to capture conversations. She'd placed a secondary camera in the kitchen, hidden behind a potted plant, angled perfectly toward the counter where the cups were placed. She had also cleverly switched the cups. The one Michael handed her was real, but she had an identical decoy she sometimes offered him when they had guests, a decoy that she could quickly swap with the drugged cup if needed. Tonight, she let him hand her the real cup, the one she had secretly tested hours earlier and confirmed contained a sedative. She wanted him to believe everything was unfolding on his schedule. He needed to believe the illusion. When he walked back to the bedroom, Michael thought of timing, a window where Sarah would be vulnerable. A quick accident staged in the garage, an orchestrated fall, a distracted driver, something that could be spun. He had even discussed a fallback with Veronica's contact, a man who specialized in claims facilitation. The whole thing felt like a business deal to him, heartless and efficient. But what Michael did not see was the man who waited. In the shadows at the bar 2 nights earlier, the same man whose recorded conversation Sarah had captured, documenting an extra $5,000 slipped into an envelope. Instructions on compromising a vehicle's brakes temporarily, a phone number for a tow operator who could make an accident look real. Sarah's evidence had already captured that exchange. Emily had wired her the audio file and the timestamp. Sarah had been listening to it every night, letting it harden her resolve. She let the sedative take effect, just enough to slow her, make her appear drowsy, then left the porch light on and the back door slightly ajar. Michael, certain of his victory, put on a pair of gloves and went into the garage to remove a hose clamp he claimed was faulty. The plan, stage a small gasoline leak, make it look like a fender bender caused the supposed fall, and manufacture an ambulance ride that would justify calling in the insurance. But Sarah had rehearsed one step further. She had arranged for the tow operator, the shady man Michael had been dealing with, to be visible on a public street the same evening. Emily's team had the operator under surveillance. They had recorded his license plate, photographed the rendezvous, and made sure a uniformed friend of Emily's, a retired cop who owed her favors, was on call. Sarah had the operator's voice on a recording, the exact phrasing he used when discussing how to make accidents look natural. The evidence sat polished and ready in 3 places: the PI dossier, a private attorney's office willing to file an emergency restraining complaint, and with a local detective she'd quietly briefed. While Michael tinkered in the garage, confident, Sarah walked out to the driveway with the teacup, heading toward the mailbox to drop off a note about a supposed community meeting. Michael flicked a cigarette toward the gravel, unaware that Emily's car, a nondescript sedan, rolled slowly up the street and parked 2 houses down. The operator he'd been working with approached the driveway as arranged, expecting to collect payment after the staged accident. And there, in a sweep of motion Sarah had imagined 100 times, Emily emerged from the car with a small, ready camera. It was the decoy the operator didn't know about, the moment of exposure she had prepared for months. He stepped toward Michael, expecting a quick exchange, but instead Emily's calm voice carried into the night. "Michael Barnes?" she asked, not loud, not accusatory. "We have a question about some of your recent activities." Michael froze, cigarette still in hand. He turned slowly. The operator's face drained of color when 2 marked patrol SUVs, strategically placed by Emily's retired cop contact, pulled around the corner, lights off but engines idling. The operator tried to flee, but he was boxed in. The camera clicked, capturing his hand reaching for a paper envelope, a roll of cash in view. It was all there: the meeting, the bribe, the man's role in staging Rex. Inside the garage, Michael heard the distant shuffle and realized, too late, that something was wrong. He sprinted toward the driveway, gloves still on, heart slamming. He saw the operator being detained and a pair of uniforms stepping out toward him. "What is this?" he demanded, voice high. Panic began to crack his arrogance. He reached for Sarah, but she stood in the center of the yard, calm and collected, the warm teacup in her hand like a peace offering. The lights of the patrol SUVs washed the scene in blue. "You were going to hurt me," she said, and her voice did not tremble. "You were going to stage an accident for the policy. We have every word, every transfer, and every meeting recorded. I hope the truth feels as heavy as the guilt probably does." Michael's face contorted. He looked at the patrol officers, at the operator's cuffed hands, then at Sarah. For the first time since they had met, his gaze betrayed fear. Pure, naked fear. "And Veronica?" Emily asked, stepping forward with a photo print of Michael and Veronica kissing in a hotel lobby. A chill moved through the small group that had gathered in whispers. Michael opened his mouth, searched for a lie, and found nothing that would stand in light of the evidence already stacked against him. He had underestimated her. He had believed in his own cleverness. But Sarah had turned where he expected weakness into weaponized proof. The night had begun as his final move, but Sarah had rewritten the ending, one where he was the one left exposed, not her, and as the officers read him his rights, Michael had a single, shocked thought. He had not anticipated the intelligence behind the woman he'd married, the patience behind her silence, or the slow, professional way she had prepared his downfall. From the driveway, under the harsh honesty of police lights, Sarah watched him go and felt something she had not expected, a cold wash of relief, then the soft, hollow echo of grief for the man she had once loved. The plan had worked, but the war was not over. The legal battles, the fallout with the bank, Veronica's exposure, those were next. For now, though, Michael's final move had failed spectacularly, and Sarah, steady and unshaken, stepped back into the house with the teacup still warm in her hand. The morning after Michael's arrest, the world looked the same, sunlight pouring across the neat suburban lawns of their Austin neighborhood, dogs barking in backyards, sprinklers hissing over manicured grass. Yet for Sarah, everything felt fundamentally altered. The man she had shared her life with, trusted with her heart, had been led away in handcuffs. She woke to silence. The house felt cavernous without Michael's heavy footsteps or his habitual sighs as he scrolled his phone. For a moment, she sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the indentation in the mattress where he had once slept. A cocktail of emotions surged through her: grief, anger, relief, and a sharp undercurrent of triumph. Her phone buzzed. A text from Emily. "He's being held without bail. Charges include conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted insurance fraud, solicitation, and reckless endangerment." Veronica's name came up too. "We're not done yet," Sarah exhaled. She wasn't surprised, but the validation steadied her. By mid-morning, news vans lined the street. A local station had caught wind of the arrest, and Sarah peeked through the blinds to see a camera crew interviewing a neighbor. Mr. Jenkins, the retired veteran who lived 2 doors down, shook his head. "Never would have thought it," he said into the microphone. "Michael seemed like a good guy. Always waved. Helped me with my gutters once. To think he'd try something like this against his own wife? Shameful." Sarah pulled the curtain shut, her stomach knotting. Part of her wanted to hide from the world. Another part wanted to step outside and speak her truth. But she knew timing mattered. She couldn't look like a victim in shock. She had to appear in control. Later that day, she met with her attorney, a sharp woman named Karen Holloway, who had been briefed by Emily weeks earlier. Karen slid a folder across the polished desk. "You're in a stronger position than most women in situations like this," Karen said. "The evidence is airtight. You'll get the house, financial security, and, depending on how this plays in court, possibly restitution for emotional damages." Sarah stared at the paperwork, her name printed boldly across the top. Divorce proceedings, asset freezes, restraining orders. It was all moving faster than she had imagined. "Do you want to pursue full charges?" Karen asked carefully. Sarah didn't hesitate. Yes, he wanted me gone. He planned it. He doesn't get to walk away. That evening, Sarah received another update from Emily. Veronica had been picked up for questioning after detectives found text messages linking her directly to Michael's plot. The messages were damning. Discussions about payouts, travel plans to Mexico, even coded references to when she's out of the picture. Veronica's face appeared on the evening news. The camera caught her ducking into a police car, hair disheveled, sunglasses hiding her eyes. Neighbors whispered. Friends texted. Sarah ignored most of it, choosing instead to sit on the porch with Max, sipping tea, real tea this time, untouched by poison. She watched the sun dip low, painting the sky orange and purple, and felt a strange peace settle over her. But the battle wasn't over. Court dates loomed. Michael's lawyer was already attempting to spin a narrative. Stress, financial struggles, bad influence from Veronica. He claimed Michael had never intended to hurt Sarah, only to solve their debt problems. When Sarah heard that, her fury reignited. Debt? She muttered to Emily over the phone. We weren't drowning. We were fine. He wanted money, freedom, and her. He wanted me gone because I stood in the way of his fantasy life. Emily's voice was calm. That's why we make sure the world knows the truth, not just the courts. The following week, Sarah sat down for an exclusive interview with a reputable news outlet. She hadn't planned to go public so soon, but Karen advised it would strengthen her case and protect her from character attacks. The journalist leaned forward, recording device between them. Sarah, what was going through your mind when you realized your husband had been drugging you? Sarah's throat tightened, but she met the woman's gaze. At first, disbelief. I kept thinking, no, not Michael. But then I saw the cash, the policies, the messages. I realized the man I thought loved me was planning my death. And in that moment, I made a choice. I wouldn't be his victim. I'd be his downfall. The quote ran everywhere. Local papers, online outlets, even national syndication. Sarah Barnes, the woman who outsmarted her husband's deadly plan. For the first time, she felt control slipping back into her hands. Michael, meanwhile, sat in a county jail cell, his charm useless behind concrete walls. Veronica, facing charges of her own, tried to cut a deal. Sarah heard through Emily's channels that Veronica had turned on Michael, claiming he masterminded everything. But the texts, the money trail, and the PI's footage told a different story. They had both been complicit. The betrayal was public now. Friends Sarah had known for years texted apologies, shocked by the scandal. A few tried to defend Michael, unable to reconcile the man they knew with the man he truly was. Sarah didn't respond. She had no energy left for sympathy. Her focus was singular: survival, justice, and rebuilding. One night, weeks after the arrest, Sarah stood in the garage, the very place where Michael had planned her accident. The shelves still held his tools, the faint smell of oil lingering in the air. She ran her fingers over the workbench, remembering how she once admired his ability to fix anything, to build, to create. But what he had built this time was a prison of his own making. And she had given him the final push inside. As she closed the garage door, Sarah whispered to herself, "You thought I was weak. You thought I'd sleep through it. But I was awake the whole time." The words tasted like victory. The courthouse smelled faintly of polished wood and stale coffee. Sarah sat in the front row, her palms resting calmly on the oak bench, her heart steady. This was the day everything culminated. Months of fear, betrayal, and careful planning had led here. Michael shuffled in, shackled at the wrists, wearing an orange jumpsuit that stripped him of the polished confidence he once wielded like a weapon. His hair was unkempt, his jaw shadowed with stubble. When he glanced toward Sarah, there was no trace of love in his eyes, only desperation. The judge entered and the room rose. The trial began. The prosecution laid out the case with precision. Financial records showing Michael's secret accounts, text messages with Veronica, surveillance footage of cash exchanges, and the toxicology report proving sedatives in Sarah's tea. Witness after witness testified, Emily presenting her PI findings, the retired cop explaining the sting operation, even the tow operator describing Michael's request in exchange for cash. Sarah watched as Michael's attorney tried to spin the narrative. He painted Michael as a man under stress, manipulated by Veronica, never truly intending harm. But every piece of evidence eroded the story. Every photo, every bank transfer, every recording showed intent, planning, and cold ambition. When Sarah was called to the stand, the courtroom hushed. She walked slowly, composed, every step echoing. Taking her seat, she looked directly at Michael, refusing to flinch. "Mrs. Barnes," the prosecutor began, "when did you first realize your husband was attempting to harm you?" Her voice was steady, carrying across the silent room. "The night I tasted bitterness in my tea. The night I realized the man who promised to protect me was trying to put me to sleep. But I didn't sleep. I watched, and what I saw shook me to my core." Gasps rippled through the gallery. The prosecutor nodded, encouraging her. "What did you see?" Sarah turned her gaze briefly toward the jury. "I saw him rifling through our documents, collecting my insurance policies. I saw him meeting a woman he was having an affair with, exchanging cash with a man who specialized in staged accidents. I saw him building a life where I no longer existed. And I realized if I didn't act, he'd succeed." Her words cut like glass. Michael shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting away. The defense attorney tried to rattle her, suggesting she exaggerated, that she had misunderstood. But Sarah didn't waver. "I didn't exaggerate," she said firmly. "I documented. I photographed. I recorded. If I had stayed blind, I wouldn't be sitting here today." The jury watched her closely, nodding, some with tight jaws of anger on her behalf. When closing arguments ended, the weight of silence hung heavy. The jury deliberated for only 3 hours. On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud, the foreperson read, "We find the defendant guilty." On the charge of attempted insurance fraud, guilty. On the charge of reckless endangerment, guilty. Each word was a nail in the coffin of the man Sarah once loved. Michael's shoulders sagged with each verdict, his face pale, sweat collecting on his forehead. The judge's final statement rang like a bell. "Michael Barnes, for your calculated attempt to end the life of your wife for financial gain, this court sentences you to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole." Michael's head dropped. The sound of the gavel echoed. It was over. Sarah exhaled, her chest finally loosening after months of pressure. As officers led Michael away, he turned one last time to look at her. His lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. Sarah met his gaze one final time, unblinking, and then looked away. He was no longer her husband. He was a criminal, a stranger, a cautionary tale. Veronica, too, faced justice. She had taken a plea deal, confessing to her role in exchange for a reduced sentence. But her name was ruined, her career destroyed, her freedom gone. For Sarah, it wasn't just about punishment, it was about truth. The world finally saw them for who they were. Weeks later, Sarah walked through her neighborhood with Max at her side. Neighbors waved, some awkwardly, some with genuine support. The whispers had shifted. She was no longer the poor wife whose husband betrayed her. She was the woman who had uncovered the truth, who had refused to be silenced. Life wasn't instantly perfect. The divorce paperwork was still thick with legal jargon. The house felt haunted by memories, and loneliness sometimes gnawed at her late at night. But it was hers, her house, her life, her freedom. On a quiet Sunday morning, Sarah brewed herself tea. She carried the steaming cup onto the porch and sat in the rocking chair. The warmth of the mug seeped into her palms. The taste was pure, untouched. She smiled, a soft, genuine smile that felt foreign after so long. Emily joined her, dropping by as she often did. "You did it," Emily said softly. "You got your justice." Sarah looked out at the horizon, the sky painted gold by the rising sun. "Justice, yes, but more than that, I got myself back." She took a slow sip, letting the flavor settle. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. And as she breathed in the morning air, she whispered to herself the words that had carried her through the darkest nights. I was awake the whole time. And this time, she would never close her eyes again.